Imagine standing at the edge of your land, the place you grew up exploring, the soil that carries the footprints of your childhood, and seeing a freshly painted neighborhood blooming where nothing should exist. 96 houses, 96 driveways, 96 mailboxes lined up like smug little sentries guarding someone else's dream. And all of it sitting quietly, confidently, absurdly, on land that legally belongs to you. The kind of discovery that makes your heart forget its rhythm. That morning, I didn't just wake up to a problem. I woke up to a story so outrageous it felt ripped out of a legal drama. And yet, as unreal as it seemed, it was happening. Brick by brick, concrete slab by concrete slab, right where my family had planted time. But before I take you into the courtroom, before the deed comes out like an ancient scroll that changes everything, let me start with the day I realized I was living inside a slow-moving catastrophe, wearing a hard hat. The first signs were subtle, almost easy to miss. A few surveyors walking around with orange vests, their equipment blinking like robotic insects scanning the earth. Trucks rumbling past more frequently, dirt shifting, stakes planted. For weeks, I assumed they were expanding the county road, or maybe prepping for some construction nearby. Close enough to hear the clatter, but far enough to ignore. After all, my land stretched wide, a quiet stretch of earth that had stayed untouched for decades. Then the noise got louder. The machinery grew larger, and one afternoon, when the air tasted like sawdust and the sun hung heavy, I walked out and saw them. The beginnings of foundation lines etched into the soil like scars. My soil. I remember the way my chest tightened. Confusion lit up my mind like a panel of flickering bulbs. Maybe they had the wrong plot. Maybe this was a mistake. My land wasn't for sale. It wasn't zoned for a subdivision. It wasn't part of any development deal. So I approached one of the workers, a guy in a neon vest with headphones stuffed in one ear, and asked him what was being built. "New HOA community," he shouted back over the roar of a cement mixer. "Big project. Been in planning for years." I felt the world slow. Years. Planning? On whose property? When I told him this land belonged to me, he paused, stared at me, laughed like I'd said the sky had turned into a banana peel, then went back to work. That was the moment a strange instinct settled into me. Not rage, not panic, something colder, something patient. I went home, rifled through my drawers until I found the worn manila envelope that held my deed. The paper felt nearly sacred in my hands, the proof of ownership, the anchor of generations. I read it once, twice, 10 times. Then I drove to the county recorder's office. I wanted confirmation from someone who didn't share my last name or my nostalgia. The clerk pulled up the records, scrolled, frowned, scrolled again, then told me what I already knew. I owned the land. Completely, unequivocally. Not a debate, not a gray area. And yet, a massive HOA-funded subdivision was erupting across it, as if deeds were optional and property lines were imaginary. That night, anger marched through me like a parade with torches. But under it, a quieter realization tugged at me. If they were bold enough to begin construction without verifying ownership, then something bigger and more careless was driving this project. So instead of rushing out there demanding answers, I sat at my kitchen table with the deed laid out like a strategy map. And slowly, a plan began forming. A plan that required patience, timing, and a level of calm I wasn't sure I possessed. I contacted a lawyer the next morning, explained what was happening, and braced myself for him to tell me it wasn't as simple as I thought. Instead, his voice went strangely still. "Don't stop them," he finally said. "Let them build. Let them finish. Then, we'll handle it." It sounded wild, impossible, even cruel. But the more he explained, the more the strategy revealed its brilliance. So that's what I did. I stepped back, watched, waited. And in the months that followed, I witnessed a neighborhood rise like a mirage turning real. Streets paved, sidewalks poured, homes framed, walled, painted, polished. Driveways sprung up in perfect rows, kids' playgrounds installed, decorative ponds filled. Each day I'd walk along my boundary line, or what used to be my boundary line, watching the workers hammer away at a world built on a borrowed foundation. Sometimes I felt anger ignite again, hot and bitter. Other days, disbelief wrapped around me like fog. But through it all, I held on to the plan. The HOA board strutted across the construction site like self-appointed monarchs. Clipboards, sunglasses, that overly official aura of people who mistake authority for divinity. They held meetings, made announcements, set rules for houses that weren't legally allowed to exist. They didn't know. The irony was too perfect. And while their arrogance could have fueled a small power plant, I kept quiet. I let them build their kingdom atop my land, like someone planting flags on air. Then, the day families began moving in, everything shifted. Seeing the first moving truck rumble down the new street stirred emotions I didn't expect. Kids hopped out with backpacks bouncing. Parents stretched, smiling as they breathed in that new home smell of fresh paint and open possibility. And it hit me. They weren't villains. They weren't part of the corruption. They were innocent. People looking for a safe place to plant their lives. Watching them made my chest ache. It wasn't their fault the HOA's reckless confidence put them in the crosshairs of a legal disaster. They deserved better than the mess the developers created. But something else hardened in me too. A resolve. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about holding accountable the ones who gambled with other families' futures. And that day came sooner than anyone expected. The lawsuit hit the HOA and the developer like a tidal wave they never saw coming. The court date was set. Papers were filed. My lawyer walked in steady and silent, carrying a folder that might as well have been a thunderstorm in disguise. The HOA showed up wearing smugness like a tailored suit. Their president, a man who always talked as if punctuation didn't apply to him, carried himself like the decision was predetermined in their favor. They denied everything, claimed ownership, insisted I must be mistaken, argued the paperwork the county had was inaccurate, outdated, misfiled, confused, corrupted, or whatever word they thought might make their negligence disappear. And then, at the perfect moment, the kind of moment that makes time hold its breath, my lawyer stood, reached into his folder, and pulled out the deed. The original deed. The one with signatures, stamps, dates, clear boundaries. The truth. He placed it before the judge with the calm reverence of someone placing down a royal decree. The room changed. You could feel it. Energy shifted like a silent tide rolling in. The judge picked up the document. Read. Paused. Read again. Looked at me. Looked at the HOA. A quiet ripple moved through the gallery. The HOA president's face drained, shades of shock pulling his expression apart. The whispers rose like wind in tall grass. The judge spoke slowly, delivering each word with the weight of a gavel made of stone. The land belonged to me. Every house, every road, every laminated HOA guideline printed on expensive paper, all of it sat illegally on my property. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, bursting with disbelief, tension, unraveling arrogance. The HOA leaders looked suddenly fragile, like statues with cracks exposed. For the first time, they seemed to understand the gravity of what they'd done. But the moment wasn't triumphant the way I imagined it would be. Instead, something heavier settled in my chest, a blend of vindication and sorrow. Because the families who had moved into those homes, who had celebrated their new beginnings, were now perched over a cliff they never saw coming. The law gave me the right to evict, to reclaim the land, to flatten the development if I wanted to. But when I pictured those families, the kids chasing each other in the cul-de-sac, the parents planting flowers, the elderly couple enjoying their porch swing, my heart wouldn't let me do it. Justice didn't have to be cruel. It just had to be clear. So I made a choice. Instead of swinging the hammer down on lives that weren't responsible for the mess, I reached out to the residents, one by one. We met in driveways, in living rooms, in small groups where fear lingered like a storm cloud overhead. They were scared, confused, angry, not at me, but at the HOA who had gambled with their futures. And as we talked, something remarkable happened. Hope began to peek through the cracks. We worked with lawyers, negotiated, repaired what could be repaired. And piece by piece, we rebuilt the community's foundation, not in concrete, but in trust. The HOA? They lost their authority entirely. Their power dissolved like dust kicked into the wind. The residents voted them out, stripped their influence, replaced chaos with cooperation. The land was legally transferred, properly this time, with contracts drawn carefully and transparently. And for the first time, that neighborhood felt like something real. Not a product of arrogance, but a community reborn from accountability. Now, when I drive through the streets lined with those 96 homes, there's a strange comfort to it. Kids still race bikes. Families grill in their yards. Porch lights glow warmly at night. Life happens quietly, steadily, beautifully. And though the memory of what they did still rests in the soil beneath them, something better took root above it. A collective reminder that rights matter, truth matters, patience matters, and arrogance eventually collapses under its own weight. People sometimes ask why I let them finish building before taking action. Why I didn't march in sooner, furious, demanding answers. The truth is, sometimes the strongest move is the one played with silence, timing, and absolute certainty. Letting them build wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And when the deed finally came out in court, it wasn't just a legal document being presented. It was the truth rising to the surface like bedrock waiting to be uncovered. This entire ordeal taught me something I'll never forget. You can't stop people from building illusions, but you can wait for the right moment to reveal what's real. And on that day in court, reality arrived like a sunrise. Clear, unavoidable, final. So yes, they built 96 homes on my land. Yes, I let them finish. And yes, I pulled out the deed and watched the truth dismantle everything they thought they controlled. But in the end, what rose from the ashes wasn't anger. It was accountability. What survived wasn't the HOA's pride. It was the community's future. And sometimes, that's the kind of justice that lingers longest. And every now and then, when I walk past that neighborhood and see a kid drawing chalk hearts on the sidewalk that once didn't legally belong to them, I feel something strange and steady settle in my chest. A quiet kind of peace. Because the land may have been mine, but the story? That now belongs to all of us.